And she was like, oh, well, this is the Section 8 housing specialist. She's like, well, I need Sherelle to submit in writing that she's going to be moving out of that unit in the next 30 days. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We have to find her a unit to move in, which we did find somewhere for Sherelle to move to. But since we couldn't get in touch with you guys to get the moving papers and do her recertification, that unit that was available is no longer available to her. So now we're still out of looking, right? So she said that she never received the paperwork, which I CC'd her, the director, and the HPV department, which is, I guess, like the intake department. I made sure I CC'd all of them on there along with Sherelle. So me and Sherelle got the forwarding email that we sent over, but they said that they didn't receive it. Long story short, I said, that's fine. I'm going to send it again, and I would like to stay on the phone with you so you can let me know that you have received this email. So then once we did that, of course, she was like, oh, yeah, we got the paperwork. I was like, okay, so what's the next step? Because Sherelle needs to move. Like, I explained our situation, what's going on, and this has been going on for some time.
Welcome to another episode of the CS podcast. I am excited to continue down this road of housing justice. The more I dig into the story, the more we just pull back the layers, the more interesting it gets. So I'm super excited about this episode today. We have two powerhouses from the Hill District Consensus Group, Miss Carol Hardeman and Jala Rucker. I'm so excited about this episode. You're going to learn so much. Some things might be just as shocking to you as it was to me, but we're going to get this thing started. Stay with us. Make sure you share this episode after you've watched it. Make sure you check in with the Hill District Consensus Group, with PER, with Catapult Pittsburgh, with the Wellness Collective, and all the other folks who are out here doing the work, making sure that our people are put first. It's always people first for all of us, but we're going to get here and start with the show. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miss Carol. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shannon. I really appreciate this and you taking time to want to talk to me and just hear about how everything's been.
Absolutely. Like I don't say a whole lot. I say things in my own ways, but I watch more than I say. And so I'm always watching how folks moving, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're saying, not saying. And I definitely have been seeing you and seeing the Hill District Consensus Group moving and shaking, especially throughout this pandemic. But we're going to get into that in just a minute. The first thing I want to ask you is, Miss Carol, where are you from?
I am from the Hill. Reason why I say it like that, because, we're losing our identity every day, and so when I am born and raised Hill District, I went to all the Hill District schools and, Shinley High School and about that part, that's gone. And, been involved with the neighborhood for the community probably since I could walk. Because my mom, she was involved with education and particularly Head Start. And so, I had to take it back there because when we were kids, my mom had us in DC, her and her comrades, and we had signs. So we were standing out there, education, education. And, of course, a lot of doors really, really open back then for equal education at that. Like, even going back to high school, even getting the courses that we needed to enrich us, like Black history and females, young ladies being able to wear pants to school. And, that was a big deal, And so there were a lot of people that stood up for our education. And my mom, she's now with the ancestors. And I remember my mom was very active. And I remember one day she was just sitting, chilling. And I said, "You're not going to the meeting? You're not going doing this?" "Oh, sorry." And she said, "No, it's time for me to pass the torch." So she passed the torch and, stayed very involved, similar to what our work, going door to door, passing out, offering rides, childcare. None of this is new. None of this is new. This, we stand on a lot of people's shoulders that, that really opened the door for us to be doing what we're doing today, whether it's a consensus group or wherever you're at.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Definitely big love to your mom for forging a way for you to be in this space. Being in this space your entire life. I'm thinking about, as you were talking about, just like your matriculation into adulthood and advocacy and activism and all the things that make our communities what they are. I'm thinking about how that was not my dynamic. I ended up here because it's just who I am. It pulled out of somewhere, and I had to grow into this space too, right? Like I was very ignorant. Let me be very clear about that. I was very ignorant about just like the way the world works for a long time because I was kind of sheltered as a kid. And so but as an adult, like kind of getting out there, like what my mom did do is very much deeply instilled like right and wrong, right, wrong is wrong, and what's right when it's for the people, it's wrong when it's against the people. That's it. And so that was kind of like my breadcrumbs into this world. But it was not my story that this was what I was raised under, right? Like everything is very self-taught, just like going about it my own way. And so like all that to say, I'm thinking about how many of us don't have that exposure that you had like from birth. Like you were born into the movement, born into the struggle. And so like you grew up with all of this knowledge, and I'm thinking about how many of us don't grow up in the knowledge, like, and it's just a beautiful thing to
Well,
have.
let me tell you something, just to clarify, you are not ignorant, because I really and truly, I look at it like this. We all got into the struggle regardless, because I tell everyone that even though my mom was very involved and, I didn't even have this. I was a hairstylist for years, licensed, worked at all the best shops, did platform work across, but, it was always a platform for us to use our voice whatever we were doing, right? And so when I look at it like this, and I'm really, I really not study, but I always read and try to keep up with what happened in slavery. And so I always look at it like this. We have been protesting, organizing, expressing ourselves, and other people with wisdom has been paving the way for us for a long, long time. Because look, going back to even what my mom was doing, I wasn't interested. I was more interested in, dolling myself up and my girlfriends, and we go do this and that. But I want to go back to even those little activities and things that was going on in my life or anybody's life, or at the time in the community. We always had to lift our voice and show up about something that we knew wasn't right. Like you said, something very key, that you weren't aware. Well, you weren't ready to be aware of what you needed to do yet, but I appreciate that you just dove right in, and then, or walking the walk and talking the talk.
Yes, yes, that's a beautiful. Thank you for grounding that, because you're right. You're right. Like, though I wasn't ready to be aware, as you said, we've always had to fight. Yeah, and as
We
you said,
always have.
yeah, I'm thinking about it. Even though I wasn't knowledgeable in the way that I am now, like in growing and continuing to grow, there's always a fight. We're always.
You didn't know you had to fight for this. And I didn't know I had to fight to wear afro or braids. Like I said, I was fixing me and my girlfriend's hair up, and we going on, we doing this and that.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, we got into the world and we're told, oh, if you want to work hair, you're going to have to. I'm like, wait, you mean we got to get a perm or straightening comb to our hair to fit in? So
no.
Ain't happening, because I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do, y'all, in the ladies' room. And we're going to hit up HR, and we're going to bring up racism, and yes.
Yes. What a beautiful start to where we're going. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm so just amazed. I watched the Hill District Consensus Group, and I'm always like, that is so interesting. Like the turns, the twists, the way that you all show up for the community. It's like in these really broad, big, but effective ways. And I think it's such an amazing thing. Can you tell me, like, first of all, how did you get involved with the Hill District Consensus Group?
Actually, I started volunteering because I lived in 3 separate cities and came back, 3 different cities, and returned back because a family member matters, of course. And each time, I'm going to tell you the truth, each time I moved to Charlotte, I lived in Maryland, lived in Florida a little bit, returned back to Charlotte because, I'm like, I want to be in Charlotte, and it's booming down there, right? But God always brought me home because I have so much love for my mom, my grandma, family. I mean, and so when I would drive back and come through the Fort Pitt tunnels and got on the bridge, I felt like I left the Jetsons and came to the Flintstones, because I just had that feeling. But long story short, I decided to go back to school, and I was taking care of the house and doing the home front and doing everything I needed. And when I got in school, I really was involved and focused around equal pay for females and fair labor rights and little things like that. And, what we needed to do to make it better, because, I don't want to get ahead about the housing, but it's connected. And so I started doing volunteer work for the consensus group, and not just the consensus group, the different churches, other groups. And so I've always been very connected. We have a board member. Her name is Miss Edna Council. Miss Edna is 93. She is still involved, and she used to come to all the meetings and everything. And it's just been since the pandemic that she really hasn't been activated a whole lot. But reason why I'm bringing her up, she always said the consensus group might be small, but we're mighty, and this ship sails. She called it the ship after
Come on now, Miss Edna.
I said, okay. And everybody has respect for Miss Edna, and Miss Edna will say in a heartbeat to me, Jayla, or anybody, y'all better not let that door close.
Come on. Come on, Miss Edna. You can definitely feel like the fluidity of the Hill District Consensus Group, because it's like y'all do so much, and definitely like that small and mighty, because like, you know, it's localized to the Hill technically, but y'all get involved in whatever's happening in the county. Sometimes I would imagine in the state
across the country.
And that's what I thought as well. I thought I seen some things that were big and expansive coming from you all. So like that's really impressive, you know, to be so committed and have like that lineage, right? Miss Edna, 90-some years old and still
93.
Showing up like what we doing. You know, the pandemic shifted a lot of things, changed a lot of rules, but still being very present in spirit, I hear. And up until that point, showing up like, come on, we got work to do. And that's how community should happen. That's a beautiful thing. And so we talked a little bit about like, you know, like just the beauty and the expansiveness of the Hill Consensus Group. Can you tell me about what y'all work looked like prior to the pandemic and what it looked like during? Because I would imagine like everybody else that shifted in some really interesting ways.
It really has. You know, of course, going back to the history of the Hill District and the Lower Hill and the Penguins and, you know, the One Hill movement under Carl Redwood and just a whole bunch of people that really have helped maintain the consensus group, because going back to what I said, you know, you wake up, you have all this good intentions, and, you know, you're expecting a beautiful day and you want to be this way and professional, but then here comes a phone call or here comes this and that. It's always something on our radar. And I think for me, it's wonderful that it's not about me. It's not about Carl. It's about our beloved community overall. Like, you know, okay, when before the pandemic, of course, we had programming, and our programming was workshops for renters, and we were doing a lot of organizing around placemaking, like community gardens, and, you know, partnering with other groups, you know, to make sure people had the right pathways and creating awareness, you know. And so we always been doing this. We always have been taking care of our community outside of what we know about development that we know has to happen, is going to happen. But we always been pouring out and loving on the people. But since the pandemic really was here, we were approached by legal foundations and other groups to partner. And then we made that network for rent relief. You know, we worked day and night. I mean, putting it together, and we connected with Take Action Mon Valley and groups beyond there, so that we can everybody can be fed and be able to, you know, stay in their homes. So we did that. And, you know, I would say we were doing that. It just got elevated, right? And it just became like normal on our normal radar. You know, I would say we might have helped probably on average less than 20 people beat eviction or assist them through that. And I remember I would sit down and write legal briefs, and I learned that from when I took a little bit of legal classes. You know, you just state the problem, and then, you know, you like it's like a formula before you go to court, so the judge so it could be smooth. And we were only doing maybe like less than 20 people, but when the COVID, it was like 200 people, and our phone was ringing off the hook. And then it was more than just rent relief. People needed diapers and masks. We partnered with Ujima, and they are creators, and they're volunteers. They sewed masks, and we just really had it going on to take care of the village, not just in the Hill, across the whole Allegheny County and beyond. That was amazing to me. And then when the food, yourself, to feed the hood, and that was a part of us. And on down to keeping up with policy, like when the vaccine first was offered, we were out there, no, do not leave our community out. And so we had sat around the table with on Zoom with all the providers there. And if I heard that somebody was turned away, they didn't get a vaccine, I would put it out there. So, going back to the work is the work. It's almost like Mike Tyson getting in the ring. He don't come fancy. He just gets in the ring, whether he got on socks or, so that's what we've been doing. And so that's going back to, that's the only way we know how to do it, is just go ahead and get other people involved and just do it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nothing to it. That, I'm thinking about when, COVID happened and all of a sudden everybody had these needs. People who never had needs. No one knew what was going on. And I remember like the formation around care, like we definitely, make no mistake, we got through that pandemic because of the people, not the systems who are traditionally in charge of, this is how things are going to go or whatever. Matter of fact, they were calling and contacting the people like, we don't know what to do. Help us. Like, please help us.
What happened.
Yes.
That's what happened.
People were getting up like, because of like the shutdown or whatever, like it wasn't safe, especially for our elderly folks and folks with a different ability and whatnot. And health issues. People were calling like, yo, do you need help? Do you need me to go to the store? Like, making sure that people had food. Feed the Hood was preparing food. You all were involved. We were actually partnering with the Wellness Collective, making sure that we were getting the food to the folks. Like just neighbors were showing up.
And then another thing, not to cut you off, even our kids, like, our kids that didn't have internet. That's why I said we still had to advocate in the middle of that. Like kids didn't have internet. Some of them didn't have tablets. The daycare, I remember I told a lot of young ladies, I said, listen, going back to tenant organizing, y'all live in the same building, right? All of y'all go to work at various times. Watch each other's kids. That's how we did it. Like, the neighbor down the street, I miss Miss Ford, that she was a lady that I knew was going to love on my child, and my child was going to be okay when I came back. But I'm like, that's what y'all have to do. Learn to work together. And so we just were.
The kids and the breakdown of our community, that's a conversation in and of itself. Like, because what you're hitting on is like how we used to exist in communities with one another. We knew each other. Like, we grew up when we were responsible for one another, looked out for one another. And that's not the case anymore to that degree. But that, I just want to make sure that I say that's not because of any of our doing. That has everything to do with the housing crisis, with gentrification, with systemic destabilization of a community. But that's a different conversation. So, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
But it's things that we need to put in the atmosphere. So I'm glad you put it out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. On period. So it was a beautiful thing to watch. But what I wanted to get at, like when watching, so like again, it was a community that made sure that we made it through, that we survived, as much as possible through the pandemic. But I watched, like thinking about the making sure that people had help with rental assistance, mortgage assistance, financial whatever. It's like those were mutual aid groups, but that specific, like formation of system building, that was
Yes.
Black women who did that, right? Inclusive of yourself, correct?
Yes, a lot. And I'm glad you said that, because when we created that partnership all around, it was all females, but I can say the men were more involved with the food. But for us, like that nurturing, and nurturing about what was going on in the household with the children, and a whole lot of little things. I was asked recently, how are we doing all this? And I said, our work, because you brought up the system and the providers that normally provide the resources. I said, it's different for me, y'all, because I can look in somebody's eyes and see their souls in pain. Y'all in these offices and y'all on the phone. That's why I almost busted my knee. I mean, I couldn't take if I woke up and heard something happen to her, and I'm like, no, she's asking me for help. Let me just do what I know to do best. And I'm just going down to the U-Haul. I'm renting this van, and I went out there. But she doing good. She has a job now, new apartment. And I have nothing against the young man. They were just going through something, because now he calls me Ma Curl. And I'm just like, you got to learn to keep your hands to yourself. And if something's going on with you, go get yourself some help.
That's real. That's real. That's all. So many conversations that can come out of here because of Black mental health. But that's another conversation. However, oh my goodness, I love what you said. Like, and it was sticking out to me right now is you saying that I could see the pain on someone's face. I cannot look at myself to know that I could have helped and then it get worse. Like something happens because I didn't step in. I definitely I resonate with that so much. That's what keeps me showing up. It's like I can't live with myself if something were to happen to somebody, and I know I could have done something, and I didn't. Like that. That's a no. That's a no go. So definitely, I feel that deeply.
Yeah, you can tell when people, like I said, she wanted to get out. She didn't know. And plus, I always tell people, look, I've been there. I don't try to pretend like I never, Lord, we all been through something.
Right. Like you ain't never lived life. Lord.
Yeah. I understand that.
And so this is a perfect segue. So thinking about these systems, right? Like these huge institutions that we are taught and told are, heavy. They have all the control. They know what to do. We put our trust in them. And it was always interesting to me that they had no idea what to do.
No idea.
Look directly to the people that they've been telling all of us, right? Like that you don't know how to manage your life, basically. Let us do it. And when the thing hit the fan, it's like we don't know what's going on. Can y'all?
They know what to do.
Can y'all take care of this? So which actually gets us into a great segue to our conversation about the housing crisis. Now there was gentrification started well before the pandemic. It's been going on for years, quite frankly, for decades. Actually, it's just hitting us now. But it was already growing to be. It was already a swell of issues with housing prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic shot it out the roof. What has that looked like for you all? You touched on it a bit about going to court, helping folks with legal briefs. But what truly has that been, and how has the pandemic shaped how you all are relating to the housing crisis? How y'all are showing up?
It's just unbelievable because I have to go back to my journey, and I never ever thought that there would be a day in my life, Pittsburgh or around the country, around the world, for this fact, where housing, you could put a man on the moon, you could find a pet at home, and we can't really find people housing, and they're just tearing them all down. And I remember Burl Street, which is Tears Village, and all like that. I remember when they tore those down, but I still also remember like Broadhead Manor and Westgate and St. Clair Village, right? And a lot of our folks that started in the lower hill originated to, like, just because of the way the system was, they were kind of forced into what we know as the projects, Brick City, and so on and so on. And I lived on Burroughs, and it was one of the funnest times in my life, but like I said, as a kid, a teenager, you really don't even know what's going on. But I never would think that they would just want to erase us so bad after they bottlenecked us there. Because here's another thing. We keep hearing, oh, home ownership creates wealth and everybody should get a home. But first of all, now people that are homeowners, they're dealing with wealthier people moving in the community, driving up the AMI. And then secondly, they're being pushed out of their homes as well, because homeowners and renters are really in the same boat. But these are people that worked all their lives, paid taxes, got their homes, and a lot of their homes are either in poor conditions, or whoever's moving in, making the AMI and the different things that don't keep up with the cost of living a nuts for them. And so when I look at this housing situation and going back to slavery and how we evolved and we're here, it's just like the system does anything to Black and brown people in particular, and poor people, but we're not going nowhere, right? But y'all are doing all of this to make sure that we just don't enjoy life. Because going back to when I grew up on Burroughs, we were happy. We were happy. I was so happy to go to Broadhead to visit my aunt and family members, and going back to the lower hill, and people originated there, and then they ended up maybe even going to Homewood, and then you go over your cousins, and it's like we just don't really, or I don't even understand why we feel like, why the system feels like we don't belong here after our ancestors was made to build this country, right? I openly say that. I don't care who. Look, I'm like, our ancestors, do you know we were made to build this country off of our labor? And now y'all want to do this because, the housing shortage, it's just crazy. And guess what? There's not a lot coming online.
So much, so many things, right? The first thing, talking about, I'm thinking about you saying like they tried to do anything to erase us. That's absolute facts. I've been arguing with folks about gentrification for years and years and years, like since 2010 when I got hit to it, and I only got hit to it. The new library on, well, it's not new anymore, but the library on Federal Street on the north side.
Okay.
Then because the traditional library kept getting hit by lightning, so they had to move it. So they moved it up on Fed, and the new one it's the Allegheny Room. The Allegheny Room has all of these books about the history of Allegheny City, which used to be the north side.
Right.
I'm from the north side all day, and I lived there at the time, so I would walk around and walk down to the library. So I would go into the Allegheny Room and just read about just interested in about like how that whole thing happened. And that's where I learned about gentrification, because it says it doesn't say it in those terms, I don't recall, but it basically lays out like the plan of how gentrification happens and how many times it has happened. This is like the third or fourth time the gentrification, the cycle, because it's a long cycle, has happened in Pittsburgh. And so like we're just in another cycle of it, and so I've been like screaming my head off, like, yo, this is wild. It's going to get worse. Like, we got to do something about it. And folks been like, fight me back about it. But it's just understanding because of how insidious, but also how invasive gentrification is. You know, thinking about the ways that our communities are destabilized. You said they don't want us to be happy. They don't want us communing because you as a kid, you're having a good time in your neighborhood. Your parents, your mom, as we know, was organizing.
Yes.
You can't organize if you get pushed out of your neighborhood into an entirely different neighborhood because you don't know them folks.
Right.
And that's
exactly.
And that's
and then I'm glad you brought up the north side because I look at like even the north side going where the stadium is. I think it's the Pirate Stadium. Everything, those were businesses. People lived there. And I remember like it just got tore down. And, you know, of course, you know, the Allegheny Center Mall, we enjoy going over there on, you know, to go shopping. And, you know, I even looking at how that building is changed. It's not even a shopping mall because my point is y'all displaced people to do this mall. Now it then morphed into something else, which is a stadium. And now it's not even a mall no more. Y'all just moved people out your way so that y'all could do these temporary, I call them these temporary, whatever, you know, they have on their heart at that time and not really thinking long term in it, you know.
You hit the nail on the head, and they are thinking long term. It's just a part of the design, and that's what I was going back to. Like literally, there is a plan. There is a plan when the city is popping, and they want to move all the affluent white folks into the city center, and that's what like there's a plan, and it happens like 25, 30 years or so in advance. But that's what they start to slowly destabilize our communities because it's easier to pull us out, right? So that's when you see folks. I mean, Pittsburgh 20 or 10 years ago was around 310,000 people.
Yeah.
It's 300,000 people now. And most of those people are Black folks who were displaced. You know, like, but it's intentional design. It's not like they're not thinking about, oh, this is not going to be long term. It's not intended to be long term. It's intended to be how long we want to be here. And when we're done being here, we'll kick y'all out of the burbs where we pushed y'all to and back into the city. And meanwhile, while you're out there outside of the city, we're not taking care of those areas anymore because we don't care about it anymore.
We don't care if you got a bus. We don't care if you got a food, a place to shop. We don't care.
They cut all access to all of those things. The schools all of a sudden become distressed. The access to public transportation is non-existent. Like they destabilize the community so that not only are they moving themselves in and us out, but they're making sure that we can't come back until they're done with it. That's education. Like in broad strokes, that's just what it is, and that's what it's always been. And if you don't believe me, check history. Like I'm not pulling it out of the air. I literally read about it. We've seen it, and you can just watch the patterns. And it's not just here, right? Like this is happening across the country.
Across the country, and it's a long history because going back to the Lower Hill, of course, you know, and what I was telling you before we got on camera, I remember the older people used to say, the plan, it's the plan. And so we were kids. We didn't even know what they were talking about, Shannon. And then, you know, I know the arena was built. And of course, you know, we went there to the concerts because we, you know, we enjoyed going to the concerts and going downtown and so on and so on. But I remember different older people, they would never go in the arena. And just because of what they knew, they would never go to the arena. And then, you know, once I did realize and heard the plan and kept hearing the plan, and then, okay, fast forward, when we were doing, the consensus group was doing, of course, the Penguins said they were going to move, and, you know, if they didn't get their way and more or less, and that was, you know, a bunch of Billy Bull. And once they got their way, you know, before the arena was actually tore down, you know, the plan, that's when it dawned on me. This is what the older people were talking about, the plan and what downtown had planned for the 28 acres, and then you know how everything just plays into it, like the penguins, and they knew they weren't leaving town, but now the redevelopment that's happening now, and even in my, I guess, life of seeing how everything has changed, even the arena being tore down, and I realized the plan is here, like future generations, the children, like even your baby and different ones that, if they put that new venue down, music venue, and they'll be going there, and so on and so on.
Yeah, what happened before.
And then and so I think the narrative is basically the plan is here, and we ain't going nowhere. So how we fight back. We ain't going nowhere, because it's just ironic that the lower hill is called the lower hill. It's been the 28 acres. And I remember listening to the older people and the seniors, and they actually had so much history, and they said downtown used to start at Grand Street. Well, I wouldn't know that. And going back to you going to the library and finding that out, I had to go to the library and find out things for myself, and seek some knowledge. And I said, oh, okay, so Grand Street on leaped over, and because of the 279 highway that came through and split that up, down the Hill District really almost was downtown, and now it's like reminds me of the one song that Parliament sings, Chocolate City, and it's an old song, but it had a nice funky beat, and it talks about how at that time how Black people were moving and prosperous and going to Atlanta and DC, Chocolate City, and this. So it's almost like the Chocolate City song that I know. It's like I have to get it back out sometimes and play it as a wonderful memory. Keep myself, what do I want to say? Keep myself in the spirit that you ain't going nowhere.
Period.
Ain't going nowhere. Yeah, period.
I mean, they've been trying to get rid of us, but we find our way. We always breadcrumb our way back. I want to jump back briefly. Every time I hear about it, it comes up. I always want to make sure that I am censoring and holding space for St. Clair Village before we have another guest from the Hill District Consensus Group here. But before we get to that, I always like to acknowledge that, because the way that St. Clair Village was leveled off, right? Like, was wild, because those folks were just displaced. They were literally just put out on the street, like their home, like their kids, like these are kids, these are parents, these are elderly folks, these are our people, our community, and their community was literally just here today and gone tomorrow, and they were just dispersed. And what happened at that time was a lot of them got pushed into neighboring areas that they were actively feuding with. And so it caused so much conflict. People lost their lives for being displaced.
Yes.
People ended up in jail in Schumann. And how I know is because I worked at Schumann at the time. And them kids was crying out. Like, literally, I remember a little boy as he would leave my class and saying, he was like, yo, they kicked us out. And I was like, what? He's like, they kicked us out. Like, they kicked us out of St. Clair. Like, I'm here because I'm like, you know what I mean? And it is the wildest time. And the city has never acknowledged how vile that was, how violent it was, how wrong it was. And it throws me off when, just generally, and not the city in the sense of any particular administration, just the city generally, are talking about like little this, and we're all together, and let's do this, and these committees or whatever, especially when it comes to housing and food access, because they built that ridiculous farm. It's not the farm itself. Or garden. It's the fact that it exists over those bodies. And they've never acknowledged like how wrong they were, and never reconciled and never made amends and never repaired what they broke. And I will always, always, always acknowledge that because it's wrong. It was wrong. It is wrong. And people are still suffering. And I will always acknowledge it. But just wanted to make sure I said that because you named all of the places that were leveled out like over the years. We do have another guest from the Hill District Consensus Group with us. What's up, Jayla?
Jayla.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for letting me on board. Hi, Miss Carol. How are you guys?
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
I'm good.
Perfect. Thank you for taking the time out. I know you are a busy woman, very, very busy saving the world.
I don't know who's busier, me or Jayla. And I'll be telling Jayla, be like, I'm Miss Carl. I'll be like,
we spent so much time talking about how the Hill District Consensus Group, y'all do y'all thing. So I'm not surprised at all that y'all are busy. We were just getting into just like the impact of the housing crisis, gentrification, like, and then how the pandemic like shifted things in a lot of ways, like in a lot of ways set a lot of the processes up, and the role that the Hill Consensus Group has been playing to make sure that people are taken care of, even in the midst of all of these systemic design things and really like, chaotic things that are going on in the city. Before we move into the bulk of what you all have been doing, because as you know, we have shared people, right? Like as support. I'm curious, Jayla, how you got involved with the Hill Consensus Group, and also where are you from?
So I am from the north side, in Manchester, 15233. If you know, you know. But I want to say back in 2016, I was at the Northside Coalition for Fair Housing, working under Renelle Guys, the executive director there. And we were partnering with the Hill District Consensus Group at that time because there was a mass eviction of the folks in East Liberty at Penn Plaza who were being displaced. And also there were other issues going on in the surrounding neighborhoods as well. And one of those other neighborhoods was the D-Rod residents, who was under ARCO.
Orca.
Right. And that's how I started collaborating with the Hill District Consensus Group. You know, they were always one of our most supporting organizations, was the Hill District Consensus Group. And we came together as a united force, and we just started rolling out from there. You know, unfortunately, as time went on, Northside Coalition was no longer a great fit for me. But I did bring a lot of my skill sets with me from that organization because, of course, while I was there, I had learned a lot of things and how to not be powerless anymore as a tenant. Because also in Manchester, where I still reside, which is low income housing and scattered sites, we were owned by Penrose Management, and we were facing a mass eviction.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how I even got into the housing world, because I was fighting for my life and my children's life for us to have safe and quality and stable housing. And that's how I got here today. And now me and Miss Carol are like one of the only two individuals out here, boots on the ground,
Yeah.
fighting a continuous fight that has been everlasting, not just because of COVID, now that it's impacting other folks that aren't black and brown. Now the world has wanted to open their eyes to a condition that has been going on for decades. And we're just here to help.
That's period. So I want to shift over to the housing crisis and how you all show up. Jayla, you and I have we've been in orbit of each other. Like we've been on the same email threads. Like every now and again, we would like email back and forth about like things like during the pandemic, more recently. But it was very recent that we actually like communicated, and that was around a previous guest, Sherelle. Shout out to her, young lady fighting for her life, fighting for her kids' lives, facing eviction for no fault of her own. The failures of, unfortunately, housing authority in her case, and some interesting dynamics with the landlord as well. Now, when she was brought to, or she was in my orbit, Kelly Shakur, shout out to her, was fundraising on her behalf to make sure that her and her kids were taken care of because she was preparing to be displaced. She received a letter from her landlord that she had 15 days, I believe, to vacate the premises. Now, mind you, there was no formal process. They did not go to court, anything like that. This happened after, Sherelle had, her last straw was taking the landlord to, or reporting the landlord to the health department due to continuous issues with the home that were it was unlivable. After that, it felt very much like retaliation. Quite frankly, is the feeling because of the things that happened after the fact, inclusive of, and the crescendo being that letter saying that she had to vacate. So, her not knowing any better, that's what she was preparing for. And Kelly showing up just as you are talking, right, being nurturers, being supportive, showing up. Don't know what needs to happen, but I know I need to show up. Kelly started a fundraiser. Okay, we just need to make sure her and her babies are taken care of. Put the fundraiser up. Came across my my airway, so donated to the fundraiser, but connected to Sherelle, heard her story, and that's how she ended up on our show. As she was explaining the circumstances. Now I was stepped away from the the housing justice part for a minute, so I don't laws change so daggone frequently. I didn't want to say anything on the air, but when she said that that she hadn't gone to court, it's I'm pretty sure they can't do that. I'm pretty sure they can't do that. And it was sad. And then, that's how we were able to reach out to you all. And Johnny on the spot, I mean, I really it's a testament to the work that you all do. I emailed Miss Carol, hey, this thing is going on. Can you answer this question? I'm pretty sure they can't do this, but I just want to make sure I'm right. Miss Carol immediately was connect with Jayla. Here's a number. Let's go. Contacted Jayla, connected her with Sherelle, and made some things happen. So the young lady, Sherelle, and her children, her beautiful kids, are still at the place. They have not been, forced out on the street as of yet, but they are planning to leave because the place is not livable. It needs to be repaired and all those fun things. Now, where they are stuck is that now Jayla and Sherelle have done everything they needed to do. Sherelle has a Section 8 voucher. She's just looking for a place. Everything has been taken care of. Paperwork submitted, whatever. Apparently, she doesn't have I don't know who the person is. I keep forgetting what they're called, whatever their title is at a housing authority. But the person that she was working with is no longer there. And there has been no person put in place to pick up the ball. And so now she's kind of just hanging out. Did I get that right, Jayla?
So that was the case until me and Sherelle connected. Once I contacted Sherelle, I had called her on the phone once you gave me her information, and I was just telling her hey, Sherelle, I'm Jayla, blah, 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 who I am, where I'm from, and how I could possibly assist her. And I was you think you could come to the office and talk to me? And she was where's the office? And I was telling her oh, come to the Housing Stabilization Center. She was that's crazy. I'm walking in the door. And I'm what? So I look around the bend, Sherelle's coming through the door. So it was that was nothing but God putting her right in the place of my hands, because from there I moved like lightning. At that time, Sherelle didn't have active housing specialist at the HTV department, which is Section 8 Housing Authority City of Pittsburgh, because that person had actually moved on from that department. And Sherelle hadn't been connected with a new caseworker, didn't know who she needed to contact. Every time she tried to reach out to them, she was getting no response. No one responded to her call, her emails, or any of that. Of course, those folks are working from home remotely. Mm-hmm. And me having the connections that I have, I emailed the real estate asset. I was hey, I have this tenant. We don't know who their housing specialist is, but this is what's going on with them. And they actually need to move out of the unit that they're in. Right then and there, of course, the real estate asset manager, who me and him have a very good rapport with one another, he CC'd the director of the Section 8 on there, And she responded and told me who Sherelle's housing specialist was. Right? And once she told me that, I'm coordinating back and forth, but I'm still not getting a response from who she said the new housing specialist was. So, of course, me taking the next steps, I asked the director, would she mind calling me before I took it to another level, which would have been next, possibly the media, doing a podcast with you, because me and you did talk about the podcast previously before this one today. I didn't have time at that moment. And I really did want to get like updates and make sure that I'm informative when I was talking to you. I didn't just want to spill bad blood on, what was going on with Sherelle's case, because I know that the tenant could also be affected from any type of move that I made so suddenly, right? So then the director ended up calling me. That was like Friday. I think Sherelle came and seen me Wednesday. I talked to the director Friday. That Monday morning, the housing specialist was calling my phone. And I'm like, hey, this girl has backed up sewage in her basement. The landlord was really cool once I talked to her and I explained to her who I am and what I do, and letting her know, like, that is not the law here in the state of Pennsylvania. You cannot illegally do a self-help lockout to this tenant or force her to move. Like, she is a Section 8 voucher holder. And also, what I do know, you are still receiving your subsidy every month, regardless of what portion that Sherelle was responsible for paying. Regardless if she doesn't have a specialist that she's been in contact with, you're still receiving the payment. I do know that much. And once I said that, we kind of went from there. Me and the landlord got on the same page. I finally was able to talk to Sherelle's new caseworker. I was able to get all of Sherelle's paperwork. Sherelle needed to do a recertification. A recertification was due back in November. So actually, Sherelle's Section 8 voucher would have been no longer active at the end of this month on the 31st. It would have no longer been active if I hadn't taken the steps that I had took. They wouldn't have no longer been paying her subsidy, and Sherelle would have been responsible for the full amount of rent. So
now, Jayla, I'm gonna pause you real quick because it's choppy and this is really, really important. I did hear you, and because I also know, the things I heard you say that Jayla needed to, goodness, Sherelle needed to file her recertification papers back in November. And because, with everything not being in contact and whatever was going on, she was in line to lose her voucher altogether by next month, which would have put her on the hook for her complete rent and likely would have put her and her kids on the street. You got that, because you, Johnny on the spot, getting everything done, you were able to get the recertification paper. She came down to your office, y'all filled it out, got it sent over to the new caseworker. Everything was good until you haven't heard from them in a little while. So you reached back out like, hey, we ain't heard nothing what's going on. And that caseworker said that they never got the paperwork. Now I heard that's where you're pretty much where you landed at, but it was choppy. So I wanted to make sure to give the system a chance to catch up, hopefully, because this is really important and I don't want to miss it.
Right. So she said that she never received the paperwork, which I CC'd her, the director, and the HCV department, which is, I guess, like the intake department. I made sure I CC'd all of them on there along with Sherelle. So me and Sherelle got the forwarding email that we sent over, but they said that they didn't receive it. Long story short, I said, that's fine. I'm going to send it again, and I would like to stay on the phone with you so you can let me know that you have received this email. So then once we did that, of course, she was like, oh, yeah, we got the paperwork. I was like, okay, so what's the next step? Because Sherelle needs to move. Like, I explained her situation, what's going on, and this has been going on for some time. Yeah, right now, the landlord did put a Band-Aid over the issue, but the landlord wants Sherelle to move out so they can go in and dig up the whole basement, something about the septic tank or something like that. I'm not a plumber, so I don't want to,
Yeah.
things that aren't factual because I'm not a plumber. I just know that's what she said to me. I'm not sure how true that is, but that's what was related to me. And she was like, oh, well, this is the Section 8 housing specialist. She's like, well, I need Sherelle to submit in writing that she's going to be moving out of that unit in the next 30 days. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We have to find her a unit to move in, which we did find somewhere for Sherelle to move to. But since we couldn't get in touch with you guys to get the moving papers and do her recertification, that unit that was available is no longer available to her. So now we're still out of looking, right? So I was like, I'll still have her fill that out and send it over, but it's not really going to be valid because we don't know if she's going to move out in 30 days.
Is that did they add a new requirement, or was that always a part of because that's interesting.
I've never heard of it, but I guess this is a new requirement. I'm not sure. I know they're changing a lot of the rules since there has been a lot of things coming up on the news and being spread around throughout Allegheny County about Section 8 and how they move and how their most vulnerable population is at risk of homelessness, right? And it all falls in their lap. It's no one's fault but theirs because they have lost the lack of communication. People are working remotely from home, so-called, and just uncaring of what's going on for the people that they serve, right? And of course, what I do know is that Section 8 vouchers, once they're lost, that's just a pot of money that can go back into housing authorities' pocket, and they use that money for all types of other developments that's going on around the city of Pittsburgh, right? And I do know that. But I want them to know that this will be a constant fight for any tenant or any client that comes my way or gets a referral from any partner, agency, walk-in, however it may go, that we're going to continue to fight them and make sure that they are standing up to their, what is it called? Their niche, their obligations.
Yes.
Right, to whom the people they serve, which right now, Sherelle is still looking to find a suitable unit for her children. I've provided her with lots of resources. I'm sure you have too, Shannon. I'm sure Kelly has. One thing about Sherelle, let me tell y'all this. That girl is proactive. She stayed strong throughout this whole process. Like, no matter how bad she wanted to break down, she stayed strong for her children, because, I think that's what the most thing I can say is that's what people prey on our single Black females who are single-headed household, for us to be weak, right? And that's not easy. Like, we can break down and be weak at any given moment. Life be life. And Sherelle has been like a Power Ranger throughout this whole process. And I told her, like, babe, I'm proud of you, because it's not easy. And I went through it. And that's why I know when something comes across my lap, no matter what it is, I automatically act real fast because I went through the same situation with my housing some years ago. And all I know is if we don't have a seat at the table, we will be on the menu. Period. That's for sure.
Period. Oh my goodness. I have all the feels. Just shout out to you, Jayla. Shout out to Sherelle for being that Power Ranger. Like, yes, and she is somebody that anybody who speaks to her, of course, we've had the pleasure. She has so much spirit, just so much strength, and them babies are carrying her. Like, she is not going to let them children. She's not going to let them fold. Like, this is not going to happen. But I want to, like, a few things that are on my mind. First of all, I'm thinking about all the energy all of the energy, all of the connections, everything it took just to get Sherelle to this point, right? Like that took for me, first of all, I happened to be in the position that I'm in, that I happen to know y'all. Like I know Miss Carol. Like so, and Miss Carol happened to just email me that same day or the day before about an event that y'all were having. And I got the email and I seen the flyer and we were talking about like a Zoom version of because I wasn't physically going to be there. And so she was on my mind, you know. And then Kelly she just happened to be supporting her neighbor, like her neighbor, this woman that she cares about, in the way that she knew how to take care of her. And that was to make sure that her and her kids weren't on the street. So she started a fundraiser and somebody sent it to me. And so I reached out to Kelly because I know Kelly, you know, like, and then Miss Carol connected me to you. And then you went, and because you are you and have all these resources, you do this work. You've been doing this work since 2016. You knew who to call. You knew the protocol. Like even when you were getting pushback, even when you were hitting walls, you knew how to get around those walls. You knew how to push them out the way and push them open. It took so much to get Sherelle to this place where she should have been in the first place. That is insane. Like that's so wild. And she's one person, one of countless people who are going through the same thing, or unfortunately they lost their battle, right? Like, and they are on the street. Like we know folks. Shout out to Miss Tammy Thompson. She was a guest a couple of weeks ago, and she is not playing no games with Housing Authority, like none. She's playing none of them, right? Because like it's us, right? We're the ones that are showing up, and people are knocking at our doors like, I need help. My family, we're in crisis. We're about to be evicted. What's going on? Housing Authority. Like no one's responding to me. Like I did all the things that I could do. I'm hitting a wall. They're not responding. The people aren't getting paid. And here I am. And then these people are ending up on the street. We have another neighbor who she went to court yesterday. So I got to check in with her to see how that went. Same situation, almost exactly the same. But where it drills down to is Housing Authority. They're literally not taking her call. And even she also has people who are connected and know who to call or whatever else. Like, but she hasn't been able to break through the wall. So hopefully she's taken care of. Prayerfully, I'll be contacting her, later today to see how that's going. Another person who is effectively that Miss Tammy and her in Catapult has been taken care of or looking out for. She is homeless. Like she's in a shelter with her baby because of Housing Authority. Like that's insane. That is so wild. Like, so I'm feeling a lot of feelings right now, right? Like off of everything you just said, Jayla, like just like how beautiful that work was, like that showing up. We got to give it to Black women. Like, I mean, everybody has their superpower, but we got a specific type of superpower that I don't think that we ever get enough space for, right? Like, I don't think there's enough space to even hold how heavy we step when we step. What you did, showing up, like how you did it, Miss Carol, what you did, how you are doing things and showing up. And Sherelle, how she is just showing up not only for herself, for her babies, but also she has a plan to show up for us all. And I can't wait to see that blossom into what it's blossoming into. But I'm feeling so many feelings because it took that much to get her to here, and she still isn't even out of the woods. Like that is insane.
So there are rules and regulations that I'm very familiar with. So once you report even a maintenance procedure, or you're calling about your rafted paperwork, or an issue with your landlord, regardless if it's Section 8, project-based, LATEC, whatever it is, Housing Authority has an obligation to respond in a certain amount of time. And it's not days and it's not weeks. It's hours, like 48 hours, 24 hours, depending on what it is. Sherelle's issue was an immediate emergency, immediate response. That was not something that should have been turned the other cheek to. And I went through a situation like that in the past, and it had to do with mold. And I know that all the sewage that was backed up in her basement, I know there was mold in our girl's house. And there are some tactics that they will do. Like, I know, like, they pulled my rent ledger. Yeah, they pulled my rent ledger, checking to see if I had any, like, nuisance, or I was failing housekeeping inspection, if I stayed up on my rent, what was my kids doing out in the community. They were doing so many things to fight against me that all it did was turn around and bite them in the back. Because I didn't stop fighting. And I just went to another level with it. Like, I stopped doing in-house talking. I started going to the news. I start showing up at their door. I start going to their board meetings. Someone leaked their board meetings to me, and I start popping up downtown. And they didn't like it. And I had about 4 other women behind me. We was showing up. And we did outside, we got pillar to post to come and do an inspection on our units after they did an inspection. And we felt interior and exterior. And we were built in a portfolio. And once we built that portfolio, I was like, I'm done talking to housing authority. I start taking it to our state representative, our councilman, Mike Doyle. I went to all of them. And I was like, Lord, y'all gonna do something. I need y'all to help me. I need y'all to do something about this. Because every day, it was like at my house, it was like an eyesore for me. My kids was always sick. It was just a constant fight. There was rodents running around outside, trash everywhere, debris. And I found myself crying myself to sleep so many nights. And that was back in 2015, 2016, when I first got into housing, because I was like, we're not leaving this community. We're staying here. This is where we live at. This is the foundation that I had built. I turned my house into a home, and y'all gonna make sure that it stays a home for us. And that's what I did, and that's how I started moving. So when Sherelle came across my lap, and I seen the videos and the pictures, I was disgusted. I was like, oh, I'm getting down to, we gonna get down to this. Like, Sherelle, you gonna hear from me. And I don't know how confident she was with me when I told her that she was gonna hear from me, because it sounded like just she had been let down so many times, but she wasn't giving up. She was like, Ari, like, I hope I hear from you. You gonna hear from me, baby. Don't even worry about it. And now I feel like that's my little sister. So I'm gonna make sure she's good. That's for sure.
Period.
Yes, I wanted to say, home in on what Jayla said. It's really been fortunate that we've been able to be creative and know how to like crash, like she said, because it's a lot of tenants out there that go through. That's why I kept saying, y'all want me to reach over? Y'all want me to reach over? Like, not that I have this power, but I use the power, right? Because I know everybody just about in all the departments in the housing authority. Now, the reason why I'm saying that, we had a meeting with them 2 weeks ago. This is going to blow y'all mind. Outside of Jayla's story and the story that I know all these other people that I've been helping, like Miss Kerr, I'm missing my inspection. I'm missing this. I'm missing that. And I'm just, okay. So we had a meeting with them 2 weeks ago. Actually, somebody blind copied me and I crashed. And so I was on the meeting and I listened. Now, they did admit they have been working from home, short of staff. They had a lot of turnover, and they did admit that they're behind the 8 ball, right? But what I didn't like that I heard, they're going to hire all this new staff. They're going to increase and put out more vouchers over I guess the summer or whatever time, and they're going to do all this and that, right? So in my mind, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to all this, and I said, now they're going to put out more vouchers for people, like Jayla said, for people to lose not being able to find a voucher, find a home. And that money, that voucher is money that goes into a slush fund, right? And then I'm listening to their whole board, their whole whatever. And so I put a question. I said, now, I asked them a question. Now, y'all know there's a shortage of housing, right? Are y'all planning on going back to being landlords like y'all were meant to be, and them vouchers go to the unit or a house? And as we know in our community, we riding by and houses are being torn down. I'm like, somebody could be living there with a Section 8 voucher. They told me they got in control. So reason why I'm saying that, the writing is on the wall, and I have, of course, connected with Tammy and different ones. And yeah, we're creative, because one thing about it is, if you're not going to stand up and be about your fiduciary, your responsibility, all your duties, then we're going to just start calling you on the carpet. Because public housing, the housing authority was meant to be public housing. Y'all are putting it in private hands. Y'all are putting private hands, because going back to that conversation, I had to hear the whole thing about lie tech. Okay, lie tech, that's an IRS product. A lot of people don't know. There is no real live policies to hold them accountable. Another thing about lie tech, y'all use the money, okay, housing authority, you're using money to help private developers develop and then decide your residents' future. It's a whole bunch of, so we will have more stories to tell. Like I told them, like, okay, y'all can say what you want to say, but me, I'm gonna tell y'all, I'm gonna give y'all a challenge. Peel an onion and tell me which layer you cry about the most.
Ooh.
Because these people are reaching out to us, and there's what they want to know what's going on. They're losing their vouchers, they're becoming homeless, and y'all are putting it in private's hand. Oh, yeah, that's the truth. A lot of people don't know. Housing authority, they're not landlords. They're only paying for like projects like we see out there in East Liberty now, and even Crawford Square, all the different new ones. Housing authority takes that, and then they finance the project, and then they put in developers' hands like Track, McCormick and Barron, just to give you an idea, not picking on them. And then after so many years, they got the right to go market rate. That's why we got to get some community ownership in here. We got to start doing this for ourselves.
Period. Well, first of all,
we could be here all day talking about, and they be like, "How y'all know all this?" Or y'all, because we live in. I lived in Arco. I lived, and we know. And after a while, when you start figuring out some things, you say no more.
Period. That's period. You said a lot this year, and I'm excited to. I hope y'all come back to the show, because there's plenty that needs to be covered. But a few things that's sticking out to me was one, Jayla saying that what she knows is when someone loses their voucher, that money goes into a pot of money.
It goes in a slush fund called Ross and Allies.
That's wild. Did not know that. But also what's sticking out, these two things, right? So it's that, and then also you saying that HUD said that how they're going to fix the issue is issuing more vouchers. Now, something I know about vouchers,
displace more people.
Something I learned recently about vouchers, showing up for another person who was being unfairly displaced, or at least there was an attempt. We beat it. But in that conversation, the organization that was trying to displace this mother and her children, once it was decided that no, they were not going to do that, and also it was found that they forced her to lose her voucher, that they were responsible for helping her reapply and getting another voucher. But in that conversation, I learned that I can't remember if she had city or county, but whichever one she had, I want to say she had county, that apparently there's no more spaces in the county. And so there's no more spaces, but there's plenty of vouchers, county vouchers that are out here. So there's not even enough units to cover the vouchers that exist So those vouchers are going to default, and they're going to go into this pot of money.
Yep. And you know what? We learned that from Rondell.
Shout out to Rondell.
Shout out to Rondell. Rondell know every code, every whatever, and we learned that from her. And so, you know, going back to the policy, we just need the work. We need to work on that policy change, because that speaks to policy. And then, you know, everybody's like, well, okay, LIHTC is here to stay. Why? No, the housing authority was meant to be landlords. We need to advocate and get them to be landlords. I know it take a lot, you know, starting with HUD, but, you know, look, I always say, look, I'm Joshua, now I'm Caleb in the Bible, so I still got a lot of in me. if we gotta go to the feds, that's who we need to go to.
Period.
Plus, it's our money. It's our money. It's our money. And then y'all are doing this. That's serial displacement. When they told me they were going to put new vouchers, my heart just fell down. And I said, are y'all going to provide this housing? No, we already know that you can put a man on the moon and find a pet a home. We can't even find people homes. So how are they going to find themselves a home with this voucher? And check this out. They tell them, oh, that voucher, the ones that could travel, and J-Lo will tell you, you could take that voucher to Atlanta. You could take where I was saying in Charlotte. I've seen so many people that I couldn't even imagine starting to be homeless in these places that, like, I'm going back to, you know, great meccas for Black people, because they went on a whim and a prayer, hoping they can find something with their voucher, and now they homeless down there. It'd be like crazy. We'd be really getting them calls. I'd be like, I don't even know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Because except maybe try to come back home.
Right.
It's like really and truly, the housing authority, they are serial displaced. Just they are serial. They are.
Woo. We're gonna wrap it up here. So because we are an hour and a half in, so I want to make sure that we have a little bit more for the follow-up episode that clearly has to happen. But there's a few things before we do that. Early on, Ms. Carol and Jayla, I heard y'all say that we need to get people involved. It can't just be the two of y'all. Can't just be the three of us. Can't just be the four of us. Miss Tammy, Sherelle. It can't just be right. And there's people who are in the fight, of course. But we need more of us who are in the fight, because it is a fight. And as we just heard, it's not even just a local fight. Like, it's a federal fight. It goes all the way up to the feds. So there's so much to do. We mentioned Ms. Ronell a couple of times. Can you really quickly just explain what PER is, Pittsburgh Union for Regional Renters? What is that? Because we have not named it yet.
It's a group for tenants to become involved and know about their rights and to become organized. So with it, before I even say anymore, we got to realize it's more than just coming together around rent and all the things that's going. It's really almost coming together about your human rights, you know, overall. But PER is that group that, you know, you can get involved with, and, you know, we can help provide technical support. Jayla's the manager of that piece and of the group overall, while, you know, I'm on the advisory group board, and, you know, we want to keep that alive. So it could be a place for tenants overall to learn from each other, learn how to work properly, learn how to really stand up for your rights, and then really get involved. Because look, going back to how me and you started, long as you have some some energy, and long as you can stay creative, all this work comes from your own lived experience. Jayla told her story. I have stories. I lived in Arco where it was the worst, but I learned how to walk my way out of that hellhole. You know what I mean? And so that's where, like I tell people, we all have gifts and you get involved, and whatever you get, and going back to the way my mom started off, my mom, she's a single mom with like all these girls, one brother, 6 girls, one brother. And she just got involved because she knew it was right, and that she had the right to always see that her kids would be able to have a better future.
Period. That's period. So her is a great way to get started. The Pittsburgh Union for Regional Renters. If
Yes.
you're looking to get involved, that's a great start. You'll learn how to self-advocate. You'll learn how to be a contributing member of renters, right? Like joining this collective. And so their phone number is 412-447-1328. So that's definitely a great way to get involved. I know for the Hill District Consensus Group, you all are redoing your website. However, your Facebook is pretty active, so you can check them out on Facebook. If you just go type in Hill District Consensus Group, you'll find them there. Like I said, they're pretty active, and you can connect that way as well. I don't want to go without saying definitely power to Ms. Ronell Guy. Ronell is not only the founder of PER, but she also is the founder of the Northside Coalition for Fair Housing. Way back, Ms. Ronell has always been out here doing her thing, you know. So like, she is definitely a giant amongst the city. I don't know why we don't have like a Ronell Day. Do we have a Ronell Day? If we don't,
we tried to do something for before COVID, and then it was just going to be a surprise, and then COVID came. Yeah, and it was because national partners reached out to me and said, and then they like, Miss Curl, connect me to Ronell. We have to meet her. And I said, well, if you want to meet her, we're going to celebrate her.
Yes, yes. Which still, I'm holding out the space that's going to happen, because it needs to happen, right? Like, really making history here. And then also want to make sure that we've said her name, but I want to definitely hold space and acknowledge Celeste Scott. Rest in power to her. Celeste was a giant when it comes to housing advocacy and just general advocacy, right? Like, she was a complicated person. She was a passionate person. She was a loving person, and she did not give up. She was unrelenting when it came to the people, right? Like, people, as you said, human rights, or at least like when I've seen her in that light, her biggest coming out was when she fought super, super hard for the folks who are being displaced in Penn Plaza. I mean, was not playing no games out here with these folks. Not the only thing, and not even the first thing. It's just the first thing that comes to mind when I think about Celeste and all of her work was how they shut the city down, literally.
And Celeste did a lot of work, even though we all did it in solidarity, because we all bounce and feed off each other. Celeste did a lot of work policy-wise, not just local, across the country. I mean, you know, the Housing Opportunity Fund. What else? We were working on a tenant right bill in the middle of the pandemic, and then you know what happened with her, and just a whole lot. She was really a think tank around changing policy. So I just like to put that, because this work is, sometimes you'll be around the policy table. Sometimes you'll be right there directly looking in somebody's eyes, seeing their souls in pain. And sometimes you'll be around the table. And sometimes you got to crash, like Miss Edna said, crash. Like, y'all get there, crash. So this work is just, you know, it's not one size fit all.
Period. That's period. And thank you for holding space and acknowledging the policy work that Celeste was a part of. Like, policy is so important. It's a thing that feels like it's external, it's outside of us, it's beyond us, but it's really not. That's literally like, that's writing the rules to the game, right? Like, and so like, because Les knew it, you know it, Jayla knows it, I know, like, so showing up in that way is absolutely essential, just like all the other pieces that you have mentioned is essential, the showing up in all of the different ways. So definitely shout out and acknowledgement to Celeste. She was a giant amongst us. I want to also acknowledge it just feels important to do so. We've been talking about all of this work, right? And all of this work is centered around Black women. We have not mentioned not one person who is not a Black woman, right? Like the heavy lifting has been done by Black women, not only locally,
Tammy, there's so much, Sharon, that I could just look. We should just make a
we're out
wall.
here. Right. We're out here. We show up.
And just dedicated.
But in thinking about Celeste, like what I want to also acknowledge is that like it's important that as we are showing up as Black women, we're giving our whole lives, you know what I mean, to our people and our movement. I think it's also important that our people start to show up for us and that we start to show up for our individual selves, right? Like that self-care is super important. Like that pouring back in is super important. And we know how to show up. We know how to show up because we have to, because it's necessary. But I wonder when people are going to learn how and feel comfortable and just having the mechanism to pour back into us, right? Like when we're out here fighting all day, taking care of babies, building schools, building this, doing that, making sure people are taken care of. And when we're at home and we're depleted at the end of the night, like who is pouring back into us to make sure the next day that we get up to fight, that we have everything that we need to continue on. And oftentimes we come into this world and we leave this world without being poured back into. And I just feel like it's necessary to say that because we've mentioned so many Black women who are powerful and doing the thing. And particularly Celeste, who is no longer with us. She's now our ancestor, right? Like, so in honor of her, I definitely want to make sure that we are thinking about as a community, what does it look like to pour back into us Black women, right? Like our Black mothers, Black sisters, Black wives and girlfriends, and, you know, and siblings. What does it look like to pour back into our frontline workers, which is us?
I always just keep everybody's name going. Like if I had everybody that I could give a shout out, we would never get off this. There's been some fantastic women over the years. And I always say, you know, even though, you know, some people say, well, okay, it's in y'all because y'all women. I'm like, no. It's because God put Adam here, but he knew Adam could not do it without Eve. So this is how we do it, you know. But yeah, that self-care is important. Also have a social life. I tell anybody, look, I don't mind. I go out, I do what I gotta do. I have a life, you know. But you know, just do the right thing. Make sure everything's in order. Going back to my mom, though, you can go out there and you can do this and that, but you may have to make sure you got a babysitter and your rent is paid, and those things are just embedded in me, you know. But I think we all should be able to learn how to relax, and then, like Jayla said, go jump up, and sometimes we all just jump up and react and just start running around. Like when I fell when I was trying to help the young lady, you know, it's like, oh, you better slow down.
That is. Oh, thank you both for coming on the show. It's been so illuminating for one, but so powerful, so resourceful. It's been such an important show. I hope to have y'all back around because there was so much that we didn't get a chance to hit on just for sheer sake of time, but there's so much to be said. This fight for housing justice is a long one, you know, and we're going to continue to show up. So hopefully some folks join us in that. Is there anything last that you would like to say to folks before we peace out?
Well, I always say this, the housing people can't do it without the education people. The education people can't do it without the healthcare people. The healthcare people can't do it without the transportation. We got to learn to put the people in the middle, and those systems revolve all around. They're all connected. One component is not more important than the next. And, you know, we got to really own it ourselves.
Yes, period. Jayla, I'm not sure if we still got you here, but if you are, if there's anything last that you would like to share with folks.
Oh, she there.
Here, girl, I'm working. I'm taking care of somebody. Just thanks again, Shannon, for, you know, inviting me to the podcast and just getting the word out there and this information because it needs to be out there. But what I could say is this. When you were talking about systems, it's the new norm for our people now. Our people are so broken. and so facing so much shame and trauma.
Yeah.
It's like, they get in these depressed stages and don't know where to turn to, or even when they do, it's like they working off a last minute. They're not showing up and showing out when they should. It's always that last minute crisis when it's right there in their face and they locked out or on the streets or about to lose their life, is when, they want us to step up and be able to do the utmost. And I'm not going to always be able to pull my wild cards out. So I just want our people, like Miss Carol said, like, have a seat at the table or be on the menu. And
Yes.
that's all. I don't have nothing more to say. Happy Mother's Day to you ladies. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe out here and try doing some self-care.
Yes, yes, beautiful. Thank you both so much, so very much. That'll do it for today. Powerful, powerful show. Please definitely share, watch the show, share, join PER as a reminder. Pittsburgh Union of Regional Renters. You can contact them 412-447-1328, or you can check out the Hill District Consensus Group. That's where you'll find Miss Carol and Jayla. Connect with them, get involved in the movement, because it truly does take all of us. Like as Jayla said, we're fighting for our lives out here. We are truly fighting for our lives. So this is a part of a series. We're going to keep it going, talking about housing justice and the housing crisis currently going on. If you are a person who has experienced some injustice dealing with housing that was outside of your control, that had to do with housing authority, with HUD, with some system breaking down, we want to hear from you. If you are a landlord who has also experienced a breakdown from the system, we want to hear from you as well, because it's impacting us all, right? We are all community members. We exist here together. And if we are not showing up, holding truth to power, holding these systems accountable, we're going to continue, as Jayla said, be on the menu. We'll be back next time around. As a reminder, the CS podcast is going to return full force in the summertime. But in the meantime, we'll you'll hear from us, because we're running this series because life is still life, and for all of us. And that's all I got for today.